This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lynchburg. And I managed to say the new name. Whoa. We're glad you're here. Welcome. Whoever you are, whatever you believe, you're welcome. Know that we work together for justice, compassion, and peace. We also acknowledge with humility that we are sitting on lands that the First Nation people of Monacan owned. My name is Betty Corbin. I currently serve on the Board of Trustees as the president of the congregation. If you're with us for the first time, we're glad that you chose to be here this morning to participate in the service. If you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter and Friday email updates, please fill out the visitor cards. They're yellow. You'll find them on the back of some of the chairs in the black pockets. And if you're on Zoom, then you can fill out information there on the website at uulynchburg.org. Today, following the service, we will have some time to share our thoughts about the first two sources of Unitarian Universalism. See if I can get to page 2 instead of page 3. The service progresses. You might want to consider your thoughts and feelings about the teachings of world religions, and especially our Judeo-Christian roots. Do those sources have meaning for you? Do they help motivate your spiritual and ethical thinking? Do you have difficulty relating to the sources? Please take note of the announcements in the bulletin, and if you are in Zoom, you'll find them in the Friday EE News. Our young people are on a field trip today. They're so excited because they've gone over to Bob and McConnell Morris's to see horses and chickens and to collect insect bites. That probably wasn't part of the schedule, but they may be looking for a little bit of relief from the bugs. Now, I invite you to release our worries about the world and our own lives as we enter into this service by taking some slow, calming breaths. Well, I like the chalice, and if you see me jump, it's because I've always been afraid of the chalice.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life. Our opening words this morning are entitled Drawn Together, and they were written by the Reverend Jennifer Grayson. We come together every week bound not by creed or a mutual desire to please one God or many gods, yet we are drawn together by a belief that how we are in the world, who we are together matters. We lit our chalice this morning in the knowledge that love, not fear, can change the world. I invite us now to rise in body or spirit as we share hymn number 190, Light of Ages and of Nations. Thank you, and be seated. It's so wonderful to have John and Trudy here. Today, we take an offering of our gifts for the work of our congregation, the monetary support of our members and friends, along with the generous gifts of time and talent, make the work of our congregation possible. If you have found this congregation to be of value in your life, I invite you to use the offering baskets here in the sanctuary, or if you're on Zoom like I am, you may make a donation on the website through PayPal or send a check in to the church office. And so we take an offering of our gifts that are generously offered and gratefully received. It is the tradition of our community to share together the joys and concerns of our lives. Spirit of life and love. We hold up today all that's been shared in our midst, the wonder and beauty of community. We hold up those who are suffering in mind, body, or spirit, that they may find healing and wholeness. We hold up also the breadth and depth of life, the coming into this world of new babies, the rich lives that we are fortunate to exist, and the blessing of those who are leaving this life. Blessing that they may be at peace. We're aware also of all those who are challenged in living in this world, those who are suffering from heat, from lack of housing and health care. May we find small and large ways that we can help people in our community and around the world find relief from their suffering, so that all beings may be well. This we ask in the name of all that is sacred. Amen. Thank you, John and Trudy. It's great to be with you from afar this morning, and I appreciate your patience. I was telling David and Joanne and Bob that we're so accustomed to technology now that I was reliving the shock of how having to adjust to Zoom back in those early days of COVID. So this morning, we are continuing our exploration of our Unitarian Universalist sources as we could consider the third and fourth sources. And these two sources are significant for me because they reflect my journey into Unitarian Universalism. They are wisdom from the world's religions, which inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life, and Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. When I went to seminary, I thought that I wanted to be a missionary. Yet during my seminary training, I realized that I didn't want to be a missionary because I wanted to convert people to Christianity. I wanted to be a missionary because it would make it possible for me to live in a country so that I could learn about the beliefs and cultures of people in whatever part of the world I would be living in. World religions have always held a fascination for me, which is one reason that I'm going to be attending the Parliament of the World's Religions in August, and it's in Chicago. It's in this country this go round. Because early Unitarian and Universalist beliefs were deeply tied to Christian thought, exploring the world's religions was not part of our early history. And we have the transcendentalists of the mid-1800s to thank for the broadening of our religious sources to include the world's religions. And I really had fun digging into some new material that I found about Emerson, Thoreau, Walt Whitman, and President John Adams, who in the beginning of the 1830s explored Hindu philosophy. They even wove Hindu philosophy into their writings. Every time I dip into our UU history, I learn more. So last week, I was pleasantly surprised and fascinated to find information about the Transcendentalists and Unitarian thought in the Hindustani Times. It's amazing if you type in Unitarians, Transcendentalists, and Hinduism, the sources that you can find. Perhaps some of us, and certainly many other people, first learned about Unitarian Universalism when they studied or read the writings of the Transcendentalists. This movement of writers and philosophers in the 19th century New England were loosely bound together by an adherence to the idealistic system of thought based on a belief in the essential unity of all creation and the innate goodness of humanity. The Transcendentalists sought to transcend the purely material world of reason and rationality that was prevalent in the Unitarian thought of their day. They did this to focus on what they considered to be the supremacy of insight and spiritual experience as a means for them to engage with life's deepest truths. The very word transcendentalism refers to a spirituality that transcends the realm of rationality in the material world. The Transcendentalists believed that humans were fundamentally good, but they were corrupted by society, and therefore they needed to strive for independence and self-reliance. That phrase, self-reliance, is, I connect with the Transcendentalists. And here we find the roots to our third source of Unitarian Universalism and our connection to the wisdom of the world's religions. The exploration of Hindu philosophy's insight and spirituality can be seen in Thoreau's book, Walden, where he explored themes of nature, spirituality, self-reliance, and the simple life. He acknowledged the debt his writing and also the Transcendentalists owed to Indian religious beliefs, especially the writing in the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the foundational texts in Hinduism. Thoreau wrote, "In the morning, I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, since whose composition years of the gods have lapsed, and in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial." Now, the wording is certainly dated, but I find that quote very interesting. So long before the drama back in the day, long before the Beatles went to India or Swami Vivekananda brought Hinduism to the first parliament of the world's religions in 1893, writers like Emerson, Thoreau, and Walt Whitman began to help broaden America's outlook on religious tolerance, alternative thinking, and moral living, with their writings infused with Hindu concepts and principles. I certainly did not grow up or was educated with the knowledge of that infusion of Hindu thought into the transcendentalist thinkers. Emerson's reverence and respect for Eastern philosophy was nothing short of profound. With a knack for taking ancient Indian philosophy and expressing it in a way digestible for modern culture, Emerson was transcendentalists' intellectual leader, while Whitman and Thoreau stood out for really putting Eastern concepts into practice. A good example of this, in addition to Walden, is Whitman's, the Hindu influence in Whitman's Leaves of Grass. As we begin to, as we bring forward, sorry, I'm having trouble talking, as we bring forward the influence of Hinduism on American writing and culture, we need to remember how Mahatma Gandhi, while imprisoned in the South African jail, found a copy of Thoreau's essence, Civil Disobedience. And the philosophy he found in that book deeply influenced his nonviolent resistance as a method to gain India's independence. And that movement then profoundly inspired many of America's most influential Black leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and subsequently the Civil Rights Movement. As the transcendentalists who prepared America for a more direct injection of Hindu thought and practice, this became part of our heritage, opening Unitarian and Universalist theology not only to Hinduism, but also to the wisdom of the world's religions. So there is our third source. The other source we consider this morning is our fourth source, Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Though this is listed as fourth in our official list of sources, our Judeo-Christian heritage was really the first source of our faith. From the earliest days of both Unitarian and Universalist thought, our foundation was grounded in our connection both to Jewish understandings of who Jesus was and to two threads of belief held by the earliest followers of Jesus. Those threads emerged from the commitment to universal salvation, or universalism, and the unity of God, Unitarianism, as well as an understanding of how we choose to live love in the world as our ethical foundation. Over the centuries, of course, there were periods of repression for those theological threads, and our forebears received more than our fair share of getting burned at the stake. Eventually, the Unitarians and Universalists stepped out of traditional Christian thought, but without abandoning the ethical teachings of Jesus. Here we go back to the transcendentalists helping us acknowledge the wisdom of the world's religions. So over the last 2 centuries, Unitarians and Universalists have chosen a wide variety of ways to engage with our Judeo-Christian roots. We remember that Thomas Jefferson chose to edit the New Testament, leaving out the miracles of Jesus and focusing on the words attributed to Jesus. This is known as the Jefferson Bible, and we have a copy or two in our library of the Jefferson Bible if you're interested in exploring it. Universalists have historically connected more deeply with the teachings of Jesus, I think, than Unitarians. When I became a UU over 30 years ago, I entered our tradition when humanism was considered by many to be the only source of Unitarian Universalism. Or at least that was the case in the first couple of UU congregations I served. We had lost our understanding of the founding of our faith. This is my perspective. At that time, I found it was difficult to be a follower of Jesus's teachings and a Unitarian Universalist. Over the last 30 years, however, I think we have begun to more fully honor all the sources of our faith. One of the challenges for some Unitarian Universalists is how to honor our roots in the teachings of Jesus while living in a society in which much of Christianity has filled their theology with hate rather than the unconditional love that Jesus taught. I've also heard from colleagues that Unitarian Universalists from Transylvania, some of them seminary students, have difficulty relating to the UU thought they find in the United States because our sisters and brothers in our religious motherland of Transylvania are more Christian than what they encounter in the United States. It's often much easier for us to honor teachings found in the other world religions than to engage with the ethics of Jesus, in part because of our own experience with traditional Christianity. Depending on the congregation, I've found over the years that we are open to all the sources that can make a difference in, let me start over. Depending on the UU congregation, I found over the years that our openness or lack of openness to all the sources of our Unitarian Universalist faith can make a difference in whether new people feel welcomed or excluded. I find our sources to be essential for all of us to use as a reminder of the broad welcome of our faith. One of the aspects of our congregation, or of our congregational life, that I appreciate is our healthy respect for members and friends who have values in each of our sources. One moment, please. Oh, only one sneeze, sorry. I acknowledge that sometimes it's difficult in our culture today to find the authentic teachings of Jesus when there's so much alienation and pain caused, which has caused the departure of some within our congregations, our separation from our church of origin. For years, we've welcomed those people into our Unitarian congregations who have left the current practice of Christianity. And many felt that they would never enter a church again. Many of us left Christianity for theological, ethical, or justice issues. Our fourth source does not ask us to believe in the Christianity we left. We are invited to rediscover the loving, compassionate teachings and ethics of Jesus without the misinterpretations and judgment we left behind. I say that I say this while acknowledging so many friends and others who I consider to be authentic followers of Jesus, some of whom are ministers in traditional congregations, but they are working within congregations who truly seek to live Jesus's ethic of love and hope. So I'd like for us to take a few moments to sort of gather our thoughts, because I'd like for us to consider perhaps ideas of how we've been able, if we grew up Christian, to release the false ideas of Christianity so that we can reclaim the teachings of the prophet Jesus, who are at the very foundation of the existence of Unitarian Universalism, and also how the teachings of the world's religions influence how we live and think about the world today. So I've rambled on. I got off on 2 rants, but I'm wondering if there are any questions or thoughts that folks have about these 2 particular sources of our faith. And since I can't see, I have like one little postage stamp that I can see, I'm going to trust David and Betty or anybody who just wants to speak up to offer any thoughts, queries, questions.
I'd like to start. This is Dick.
Hi, Dick.
Hi. I'll jump in here. A lot of people, including ministers, have said this, that Christianity very early became a religion about Jesus rather than a religion of Jesus. And that has been unfortunate. The other thing that's unfortunate is this religion incorporates some of Paul's and other people's ideas, a negative image of human beings, that we are basically, that we inherited sin from Adam and Eve. We are basically bad, evil, and somebody had to die on a cross to save us, to get us forgiven. These kind of things have driven me away from Christianity. I wasn't raised a Christian, but I have attended some Christian churches. So I find these 2 things sort of disturbing. And hopefully the Christian church is on the brink of some kind of renewal, and they will look at their theology and say, why are people leaving us? What's going on? What's happening? End of sermon.
Well, Dick, I basically agree with everything that you said. I think it was a challenge for what I consider, remember I'm Unitarian Universalist, what I consider to be the multiple threads of early thoughts about who Jesus was. So when Constantine made Christianity into his state religion, everybody who didn't believe the way he wanted people to think about who Jesus was, those people were completely repressed. And two of those threads were the unity of God and also universal salvation. So the Trinity wasn't even part of the traditional Christian theology until the 4th century. And we sort of know where that took us, but I agree that there are a lot of people who follow the teachings of Jesus who seek to return to that authentic nature of Jesus's ethical teachings. And yeah, I could totally go off on a rant about the blood sacrifice to avenge an angry God, which we get in a lot of conservative Christianity without invoking the living love in the world, which is part of our mission statement. So thank you for bringing that up. And, maybe we can find a way to talk about that more fully in another service.
I was wondering if there are any religions that don't have a form of the golden rule as a basic.
Oh, I think that's a great, and who was that who said that?
Betty Chambers.
Oh, Betty, hey, I think that all the major religions of the world do have some form of the golden rule. I think it's pretty much universal. What I'm really excited about in terms of attending this Parliament of the World's Religions is the focus, the theme is going to be developing a global ethic, which sounds like such a big goal. But I think that global ethic really revolves around the golden rule. So thanks for asking that.
Jesus teach us in his lifetime that he was dying for our sins during his ministry before he died?
Okay, there are lots of different, Teresa, there are lots of different translations and mistranslations in, most the King James Bible and other things. For instance, the translation that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, which means you have to believe in Jesus. Really, if you go back to his native language and look at that translation from Aramaic, what he's really saying is, I am the clearest reflection of God's love, if we want to use traditional language. I'm the clearest reflection of God's love in this time. But he also goes on to say, you're going to do greater things than I did. So, by handpicking certain passages rather than understanding the whole message that Jesus was bringing, has caused tremendous destruction and pain, even though I think the core teachings of Jesus offer the world love and hope and justice. But that's my rant. And it would be interesting to sort of go through some of those and dig into them.
I wanted to just jump in here and say something about that.
Sure.
I've had some discussions with Christians about this, about what Jesus said about his mission. And there is no place where he clearly says that he had to die on the cross and for God to forgive our sins. Nowhere. There are some places that you can look at and say, well, he said someplace, I'm a ransom, but it didn't say why. And it looks like someone just stuck into the text itself out of context. So, if you read the words of Jesus, you get the philosophy of Jesus. If you read the words of Paul and others, you get the philosophy and beliefs of Paul, not Jesus.
And 2,000 years of layer after layer after layer of changing thoughts about culture and society and power and all of that. So, yes, it's very complex.
Amen.
Any other thoughts?
Yes, Reverend Terry. Basically, there's been this term, an eye for an eye versus turn the other cheek. And it's always been kind of my thinking that Jesus, his teaching was turn the other cheek. And I'm wondering where the eye for an eye came. It seemed that it was before Jesus.
Right. I think that's from the
really
Judeo.
Jesus brought the term love and love thy neighbor and how to do that. And before that, I'm not sure in the other world religions, but I'm not sure that came out in Jewish religions.
Yeah, I think that what was that Gandhi quote? An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind, which is an important quote to remember. And I think you're right. I think Jesus's philosophy was all about care, compassion, love for one another, with boundaries. We sometimes think we can only be nice, but love has boundaries too. I mean, Jesus threw the money changers out. They were ripping off people who went with open hearts to the temple. And part of what Jesus got himself in trouble with was not obeying the rules of structured religion. And the thing is, when you go by the openness of authentic love, and when you do a spiritual exploration of your own inner experience of the sacred and the holy, then that's not controllable by organized religion, no matter what that religion is. So mysticism and the wisdom teachings of Jesus are quite radical. And it's hard to institutionalize those, which is partly why Constantine set up his state religion in a way that would weed out what I think are the more mystical threads of early Christian thought. But I'm saying that from my own understanding and exploration of Jesus's teachings. And I consider myself a follower of Yeshua, which is Jesus's name in Aramaic, but I would never call myself a Christian as it's practiced today. I'm more like I find threads in each of the sources to be important in my own life. Sorry, I ranted on there.
I'm going to jump in again and make another little comment about
Okay.
this eye for an eye. I think that's from the Old Testament. The God of the Old Testament was not a nice person. you had the Jews doing things like going in and killing all of men and women and babies in a town and doing things like that. But the God of Jesus was a God of love. And so he brought that to the Jews. He was trying to bring that to the Jews to replace this Old Testament, the God of retribution. And, he was partly successful with the Jews, but not all.
And yeah, bless Paul. So in a lot of ways, I agree with that, Dick. I think in today's society or in modern society, what we need to be really careful about is because we don't speak Hebrew. And our translations of the Hebrew scriptures come through the lens of modern Christianity in large part. To say the Hebrew, the Jewish God, was all negative or all violent. We need to be careful about that because of the anti-Semitism that we can see today as increasing. And I think it would behoove all of us, myself included, to study some of the Reconstructionist Jewish rabbis and some of the really profound teachings of Judaism today, rather than saying Judaism is all about violence and Jesus is all about love, which I know is not what you intended to say, but I just, my little ears perk up sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I should point out that the God of love is found in the Old Testament, certainly in the Psalms.
Yes, yes.
So it's not, it's just the other God that's not a nice person, but the nice person does appear if you search.
And if we look at the behavior of people in cultures 2,000 years ago, I think they're incredible wars and violence and destruction of human beings across every society. So I think we can see sort of an evolution of human thought and the awareness of justice and love is becoming more primary across human culture, even though it doesn't feel like that right now. I think one of the things I was reading about Eleanor Roosevelt's Declaration of Human Rights, which she took to the United Nations, that document has been so powerful in modern human history that most constitutions of states that have been founded since the Declaration of Human Rights, part of that document is woven into many constitutions now, which I found really fascinating. But I'll rant on. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
I'm not sure how to.
Carolyn, yeah.
Hey, Carolyn.
Hi. I wanted to mention the conflict between Pelagius and St. Augustine, the Celtic Christianity, which evidently was very focused on love and supposedly perhaps came down from John. I don't like to know more about it. But Augustine, who was focused more on sin, original sin, and so forth, there was a conflict, and Augustine managed to get Pelagius, I think, excommunicated, and the Roman version of Christianity ruled. But it's interesting to look into him. I've read a little bit, and I'd like to know a lot more.
Oh, yes. And I'm not a scholar in that area. I do remember that, Augustine was married. This was before priests could not marry, but his wife and his mother didn't get along. And also, I think in Celtic Christianity, priests married for many centuries. And I think
And women
yes,
had positions
yes,
in the church.
right. Yeah, so Augustine was pretty key in repression of some threads of theology. So that would be a fun one to dig into together, Carolyn.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends in South Carolina who are really studying Pelagius right now. Thanks for that. Well, thank you for all these comments. We have a closing hymn. Hymn 134, Our World is One World. And thank you, John and Trudy. And I invite us to rise in body or spirit. Thank you. You may be seated. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And our final benediction is from Robert Mabry Doss. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Go in peace. Blessed be, go in peace.
And please join us in the fellowship hall, Drysdale Hall.